empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Good evening. Welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. I am your host, U.S. Army Colonel, Combat Medic and Flight Surgeon, Dr. Damon Arnold, U.S. Army National Guard retired. And I have a really incredible guest, and the information, we've been exchanging stories off and on, it seems like all day. She just really told me how to protect myself in Florida in case an alligator attacks me about grabbing its eye, which I never would have thought about, especially when being confronted that way. Mm-hmm. But we have AHG partner, Stephanie Kalota, a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class veteran and founder of the Political Veterans Podcast and AHG Correspondent. The topic today is President Trump's address to the joint session of Congress. And Stephanie's AHG monthly newsletter article, how are these budget cuts and firings affecting veterans across the country? So, this is really an incredible topic and timely. So welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks. Yes, the whole Florida thing. When you're raised in Florida, it's kind of like Australia. Everything's out to get you, pretty much. So yes, we were talking about that before the show. So yes, everybody. So.
But you were mentioning before, like veterans make up about 30% of the federal workforce, mm-hmm. and some 6,000 have already been fired, and so there are things that are going on that we need to be aware of. So what are you seeing now?
Well, I know for specifically what I've been researching, there's been varied reports, and I know it varies on where the veterans are in the workforce in the federal government. It is 30% over the whole. I'm seeing reports that the Department of Veterans Affairs, it's actually 1 in 4 employees are veterans. So keep that in mind. And something to update for the recent newsletter that we had, a memo was leaked actually from the Department of Veterans Affairs, which actually just recently on X, Secretary Doug Collins actually confirmed everything that was in the leak of this memo. Yeah. And I'm sorry, my cat wants to say something about it as well. And
I know she's probably cat too. That's a veteran's cat.
Yes. And basically they're stating that approximately 83,000 employees will be fired in this year. And Secretary Collins have actually confirmed that that is effectively 15% of their current workforce. And their target is going back to the workforce manpower levels back to 2019. And that can be concerning for people because there have actually been a large number of veterans that recently became eligible for healthcare because of the PACT Act. I've seen it online. The PACT Act is not just about VA disability. The PACT Act also allowed veterans a window if they weren't eligible for VA healthcare, because there's only a certain window for you to actually enroll if you don't have a rating. This gave you an extra window when the PACT Act was passed. It gave, I believe, a year or two, a year and a half. I can't remember the time frame, but at least a year to enroll. And you still have to pay or copay and things like that to get the treatment, but at least you can get the treatment at the VA, a place that specializes in your care. But so we actually had millions of veterans become eligible, and increase the amount of clients and customers for the VA. And now we're reducing our manpower with still the same amount of customers and clients that we need to take care of.
Yeah, and these are the people that actually process those claims, right? And do the
Not
paperwork.
just that.
Yes.
Not just the people that process the claims, and of course, doctors, nurses. Those people have been saved for at least the probationary firings. Majority, they said majority of the probationary employees were not mission essential, meaning that they weren't doctors and nurses. But I've been hearing conflicted stories on this, but I haven't gotten them confirmed yet. But there is worries that there's others. But the thing is that you, of course, know for doctors, it's not just we need you in the office. We also need schedulers. We need people to be taking out the trash. All of the stuff, for hazmat and hazardous materials that's there. There's a lot of support that a VA facility needs, a medical facility needs, other than just doctors and nurses.
Yeah. And, one of the things that was some of the data that came out was saying that the Department of Government Efficiency, which we're calling DOGE now, has fired about 38,000 federal employees since the start of Trump's second term to date. So we already have a big deficit that's looming in the VA system. It's kind of interesting because when we had people who were being relieved from their duties for nuclear oversight and for other things, all of a sudden they said, "Oh, we made a mistake. Oops." And it's like, well, oops can be really dangerous.
Yes. I mean, FAA, they've made a large amount of firings through the FAA, and we've had a lot of cases in the media for plane crashes or near collisions cases, which can be really scary. And I'm scared because I'm supposed to be flying, taking a big trip in April. So I'm like, I hope they get better until then. And it can affect a lot of people. I do know a lot of veterans that do go to work for the FAA and become air traffic controllers because they get their training from the military. And then they get out of the military and go work for the FAA and other, other areas inside the airports. So that's something that can be causing a lot of stress on a lot of people. And a lot of times that happens when you decrease the workforce, the quality of work also decreases. Stress decreases. Stress increases, morale decreases, which also compounds quality of work. So.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that has been a big issue has been the issue about whether people are competent or whether they are, at doing their job. And a lot of that was been thrown out about the performance evaluations and that kind of thing. And, I'm just wondering whether this is something that has a chilling effect on why a person who's asking the question, why should I put on a military uniform to defend the country, our nation, or serve as a federal employee? Why should I do that? Because if I really have a lot of talent and there are opportunities in the private sector, does that have a chilling effect on people who want to enter federal service?
It can. It really can, because there's a lot of people that work for the federal government that are actually underpaid in comparison to civilian sector. Doctors, especially, they get a fraction of what you can get in the civilian sector. But you also have a federal job, which is also a very esteemed, or was a very esteemed, thing to earn a federal job. A lot of people were like, yes. And, you wore it like a uniform, excuse me, with my monitor. You wear it like a uniform and you're proud of it. It's just really hard for a lot of federal employees now because they feel like they're being, feeling like they're being thrown away or, tossed aside. There are a lot of people on social media saying, well, welcome to civilian life or the civilian sector, go find another job. And that can be really disheartening as well. And especially when you're in a place where you believe that you are serving and you are sacrificing things for the job, for the federal government, for other Americans. So it can be really disheartening and hard.
Yeah, that's really important, Stephanie, because at one point, one of the things that people must understand and need to understand is when someone becomes a federal employee or they put on a uniform to serve the country, for example, with the military, if you put on a uniform and you are serving the country, there's something else motivating you other than money if you're only making close to minimum wage, to jump into a helicopter, a Jeep, or a tank to face gunfire, and incoming RPGs and, those kinds of things. So there's a motivation that goes beyond just material gain or the money about, that's involved in the situation. It has to go to your moral base and your compassion and passion for the people in the country and your sense of dedication to duty. That
Yep.
you're do something that is going to be furthering people. And I really get offended because I know a lot of federal employees. I know what they go through. They don't work, 8-hour days. They work out 12-hour days, 16-hour days sometimes. I know nurses who stay past the hour of duty because they want to make sure that the people that they've been taking care of and they care about their patients actually get the kind of services they need.
Yep.
So, it's, because we have and if anything, we have a little bit of a short staffing to begin with going into this, so those people who are left there, who end up losing all the support from other fellow federal employees may decide, I'm gone, it's too much.
Yeah, that's pretty that's pretty common. I do remember a time because I actually used to be a federal employee, and I've been so I've actually been on the other side.
Right.
And when we were so I've been in toxic work environments as a federal employee, and people will leave. They will find other jobs. And where I was at, it was actually Washington State for part of the time. And a lot of people were leaving for Amazon or Google and making like twice as much.
Wow.
I mean, they were working more, but they were making a lot more money. And so they would leave, and it would happen. So that might be the trend here that might actually cause a negative effect on it too, that we might have some issues. But I will say Secretary Doug Collins did say that they will continue to hire the mission essential positions.
Yes.
So the other vacancies. So it's going to be interesting to see on how that comes out, on which positions they are going to be advertising on. It's not difficult to see what they're actually advertising and moving on, because you'll see the advertisements on usajobs.gov.
Yes.
So you can see them if they're there, but that way you could see public access. You could track them. Another thing that's been happening recently is that Secretary Collins has confirmed it, that they've been reviewing all of the contracts that they've had. They said, I'm trying to remember, it's 2%. They've only reviewed 2% of all the contracts that they have entered in, and they have found duplicated or things that they don't need contracts. And they said that they're hopefully saving the veterans $900 million, something like $800 million. It's going to be interesting to see what the receipts are. I'm looking forward to see that. But the thing is that a lot of things that people know as veterans, and a lot of other veterans know, is that when a veteran owns a company, when they're an entrepreneur, they can actually enter in and get a preferred contract. They get a little bit of a boost when they are applying for government contracts. Well, a lot of these veteran entrepreneurs are being affected on these contract cuts as well.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, interesting. I didn't. Yeah, that's a great insight. Yeah, that is true. And one of the things I ran across was that there's a representative, Derek Tran. He's an Army veteran and former employment lawyer, and he has a bill, directed at reinstatement of fired veterans, and that's really interesting. I think that's more of a positive move.
Yes.
Recognition that something is going wrong with the way things are being done. And every system has to adjust, to changes. But when you make radical changes, you need radical adjustments sometimes.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And it's always pretty scary when radical changes are made, because there's an increased rate of mistakes and errors. And so it needs to be really closely watched on those type of things. And that's the one thing a lot of people are asking for, just more oversight, more things show us what's going on. There's another, there's actually a GOP lawmaker, Representative Tom Barrett from Republican from Michigan. Yeah. And he's actually sent a letter to Secretary Collins asking him to review the department's workforce reduction process and considered reinstating the laid off personnel. So it's not only, Representative Tran, from the Democrat side, it's also on the Republican side that's also fighting for this.
Yes. Yeah. And it really is a nonpartisan issue. We have, people who are service members and who are federal employees who are both Republican, Democratic, and independent. And it really goes to the core of their value to the country that, yes, can we get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse and do some reductions here and there? That's any system you can do that with, right? Become more efficient. But it's how you go about it, because if you go too dramatically in one direction, you can have irreparable harm to people who are being affected.
Well, not only that, is that if you make these radical moves, like cutting these contracts, you have to make sure that you're actually cutting the contracts correctly. Because if you cut in the contracts, the government contract, and the government decides to cut the contract before it actually says that they're allowed to, those contractors can go to court.
Yes. And
then the federal government will still have to pay that money.
Yes.
If they win the case. And it's likely, because it's happened before. There was legislation for the workforce because there was legislation that happened during President Trump's first administration. And it was directly for the VA employees. It was for whistleblower and employee accountability. And it basically lowered the standard on what is needed to fire someone in the VA. And what happened was that these employees that were fired fought back, filed lawsuits, and then some of them were reinstated and got back pay. Because they actually were found that they did not provide substantial documentation.
Right.
So this is what I'm feeling that might be happening again. I mean, those lawsuits in those cases, so many were won against the federal government that the VA actually stopped following that rule.
Right. Because they didn't want to have any more exposure to legal exposure.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was actually, that decision happened during the Biden administration, which they got a lot of flack for. But honestly, they had a lot of liability. So by any legal standpoint, I'm like, that kind of makes sense. But all of these layoffs and all of these things and other legislation that's being admitted in, to me, it's reminding me everything of that legislation that later caused so many court cases that reversed their actual movements. So I have a little bit of reservation on how much money will actually be saved until I see it play out in the judicial courts.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I was thinking about as you were speaking, there are several dimensions to that. So one is that you have an employee that's not being productive because you took them out of work. So that time period if it takes a year for you to go through the court proceeding, you've lost a year of productivity. So you're actually paying for something that we're not receiving. So that's a waste there.
Yeah.
Then also, there's an illegal action occurring that's going to cause you to have, engagement with the legal system where you have to spend government money to defend the case. And then you're taking them away from other issues that may be important. And so as you're spiraling through the legal system, you're incurring all these costs. Plus you have to maybe pay the attorney's fees for the person who's the plaintiff. And so you're going through and you also have to pay the interest on the money that you haven't provided. So actually it's a loser. It's actually a big loss potentially. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And that's what happens when you make radical changes. It can cause some issues. So we'll see how those things plays out. And it just seems like the judicial system is going to be flooded. And it seems like a lot of these cases are going to be appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, because that's typically what's been happening with a lot of cases that President Trump's, hands have been on them. So that's something for us to watch out for and really try to see how that one's going to play out.
Yeah, that's interesting. And every system, as people are moving into the administration, I just want to see the best for the country. And there are going to be a lot of learning lessons, and what we don't want to have is, a negative impact on citizens, on our veterans, and that kind of thing as the process unfolds. But we have to make sure we're taking judicious steps to understand and to, have enough transparency to see what's happening, so that we can make, they can make corrective actions as an administration.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as a former federal employee, I actually was a supervisor. It's not that difficult to do the actual, I'm trying to think of the right words, the actual actions to move forward, at least keeping the person accountable and actually holding them to the standard and then going through the procedure of letting them go. It's actually not that difficult. And so that's one of the things. But the thing is that a lot of people believe it's difficult. They think it's difficult, but it's not that difficult. It's pretty spelled out there, especially if you're a supervisor that has learned how to do the actual documentation. If you know how to do the documentation for performance standards, then you know how to do the documentation for, to letting somebody go, to actually trying to get them fired because they're not up to performance standards.
Yes, and one of the things that we talked about earlier, Stephanie, was, that the veterans who are participating in this are usually really highly motivated people. They are there to do a job, and we had, I'd mentioned that I saw one particular brief issue where one of the military personnel was fired while they were overseas being deployed, and that's against the against really the law.
Right. Well, I haven't seen the confirmed. I haven't found the confirmed story yet. So this is not a confirmed thing. I'm not confirming that this could happen. That this is actually happening. But it's something I can conceive to happen on radical moves of firing probationary employees.
Yes.
That is possible if it happens so fast. But yes, it is illegal to fire anyone who is on deployment orders, for any reason, even if it is technically for cause, and they actually found out that this person did something illegal on their job, then deployed. You can't actually fire the person until they come off of orders.
Yes.
So,
and the VFW put some really good guidelines out about, the issue of, what do you do if you find yourself fired as a federal employee? And they were, looking at, because right now there's a lot of talk about probationary status versus permanent status. And they were telling people, a starting point would be determining how you're being classified on the SF50, so your form, standard form 50. And it sort of give sort of step-by-step guidelines. So people who are in this situation, the VFW is a good source, by, going to their website and looking at some of the suggestions they have, about, veterans' preference and layoffs and, being rehired. There was one thing I heard that there was some discussion on one of the major news channels about people having difficulty being rehired after having that mark on their record of not having performance status, met the performance status. And
or that they were told, well, a lot of probationary employees were fired for performance without even having a performance evaluation on their record.
Right.
So that's one that I know is probably going to make it into the judicial courts. There have been a few states that actually have joined. I know Washington State joined the lawsuit most recently, and they have a lot of federal employees there. So I'm not surprised about that move whatsoever. But yes, it can be much more difficult. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know when they hear about these probationary fires is that they're thinking of just entry level. The thing is that if you're promoted as a federal employee, you could be put on a probationary period. So you could be a 12, 20-year federal employee, just got a promotion, had in the probationary period, and then fired.
Boy, that's that's a good point to make. Yeah.
Yes.
Because most people think this is a startup, a new person, right?
No, this could be people that have been actually working for the federal government for a number of years, but then they received a promotion.
Wow, that's a great point. Didn't realize that. Yeah.
You're losing experience because of that. And that can be very difficult. So this is going to be something to watch.
Yeah. And, you were, talking about the presidential, talk and, how, it really was not, a State of the Union address, but a joint session.
Yes.
So maybe you can explain a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, State of the Union doesn't come in until a year being in. They're supposed to be doing it every year, or there's certain timeframes per the Constitution. And so it is basically a joint session address of both chambers of Congress. And it is somewhat perfectly timed because it's right before the Senate goes into their little recess that they have, their little like a spring break. Yeah. So, but yes, that's what he had done so that he can address everybody and talk about all of the movements that's been happening with DOJ and with all the executive orders that they signed, and to have some interesting conversation between the political parties. Yeah.
And some good things were pointed out. I wish that we had heard a little bit more about veterans in the talk.
Yeah, because there wasn't much.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't much at all. And there wasn't any mention about Social Security as well. One thing that most people don't know is that veterans are more likely to actually be on Social Security because they are more likely to be disabled. And there was no promise for cuts to Social Security programs. So that's one thing that a lot of people are marking out there as something as a red flag for those people that are dependent on Social Security.
Oh, yes. And one of the things that it goes back to, Lyndon B. Johnson, when he passed the Social Security Act. And, it goes back, I think the first person to receive a card was a former president and his wife. So the thing about that is that a lot of people don't realize that people who are in long-term care facilities or in nursing homes, that type of thing, Medicare does not cover that, but Medicaid does. Medicaid can cover that. And so if you get rid of Medicaid, you may be affecting people who are in long-term care settings, people who have disabilities that need that kind of care. So that's something that's going to be important. But we're running out of time. So as usual, Stephanie, every time we start talking, we run the clock faster than it should be going. But it has been incredible. Your insights have been really remarkable. I'm glad that we have your expertise on the show. So thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, stay with us.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our...
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
Where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. I am your host, U.S. Army combat medic and flight surgeon, Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold, U.S. Army National Guard retired, and I have a special guest speaker tonight. It's Dr. Thomas Britt, MD, MPH. He's a veteran. He served during the Vietnam timeframe. He is also a radiologist, and he is a professor of public health at Chicago State University, and is very, very highly skilled and knows the field of public health like the back of his hand. Tonight, we're going to talk about the topic of protecting our public's health during turbulent times. So certain things are going on right now in the healthcare industry in general. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro before Dr. Britt comes on. But the treatment and diagnostic breakthroughs foreshadowed that our prospect of personalized patient care is going to be even more critical as time goes on because of AI, our genetic testing and biometric data analysis, and even advanced research techniques are paving the way to achieve this objective. So one of the things that we have to do is these things are being custom made and tailored to specifications of a particular patient's medical problem. So we have a lot of veterans who suffered from exposures to various chemicals. We have the PACT Act that covers that actually opens the door for veterans to be evaluated more properly in the wake of things like Agent Orange exposure during Vietnam and how the aftermath of that and how that unfolded. But this is a departure from the focus that we used to have on medicine, where we would try to efficiently get things done and make steps towards getting things done quickly and making sure that the overall standardization of care centered on a hypothetical median patient through care variation reduction via standardized treatment options. And this is really spoken of in a very incredible article, which will be posting online, that will go into this in more depth. But the benefits and harms of increasing set of complex medical conditions and options that are available is really beguiling. It makes it really difficult for clinicians to have proper decision making, especially in the setting of one that best aligns with an individual patient's goals. So improving access to care requires leaders to address really sport-specific longstanding challenges. And these are things that have always been a problem within the healthcare system. It's really how we pay for healthcare and the appropriate use of these new treatments and, the cost effectiveness of these treatments, making sure that we have the clinical decision-making tools and the insight to know and the wisdom to know which ones to use where and when. And then also making sure that we maintain the privacy of our patients. The HIPAA, Health Information Portability, Act is really something that is is sacred really within the medical field, making sure we protect our patients' anonymity and their privacy in their medical diagnoses and how they're being treated. So this is something that I was going to speak in more depth with about Dr. Britt. This is, some conditions that we've been having to deal with is that we are, dealing with things like the measles outbreak in Texas right now. It's actually occurring in multiple states from the West Coast throughout the South. And those measles outbreaks are cases that sometimes we see in the background, mostly related to people who are traveling, who get exposed, and these people are unvaccinated when they leave the country, pick up the measles and then bring it back when they return home. But the case of the measles outbreak in Texas has been variously reported as being about 134 cases presently, and with one death of a child that was completely unnecessary. So, I wanted to at least acknowledge that the Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., did recommend that those people in that affected area receive the measles vaccine, but also, offered other things such as using vitamin A and cod liver oil as, other things that can be assisted in the treatment of this disease, measles. Measles actually, if you are unvaccinated and you come in contact with someone who has measles, you have about a 90% chance of actually contracting measles. That's how virulent this organism is. It's probably the most contagious viral disease that we are aware of. And so in this time, I really recommend that people do get their measles, mumps, and rubella vaccination, and discussing that with your provider for them to give it to you, when it's appropriate. Some people are already vaccinated. They have the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. But in that, the people who are vaccinated, it should be a lifelong immunity if you have the MMR. In the healthcare field, sometimes we test for antibodies for the MMR just to make sure people are protected because they're in a much higher risk area by working in a hospital where patients may come in who have those illnesses. So we are now in a time period where we are facing an infectious disease that can potentially harm people. Now, Texas and many of the places in that area, we do have veterans. We have people who are retired in that area who are older. And there's a thing called energy, where as we get older, sometimes our immune system doesn't work quite as well. So this is really a threat that we have to take seriously as it seems to be unfolding in the country. Now, one of the things that we have to also do is protect our public's health. So when we start looking at things like people who are going to be leaving the federal government, if they are in critical areas that are covering food safety, they are covering, the federal employees who are in Health and Human Services and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. These people are really essential to make sure that we protect the health of our nation. And they are dedicated, civil servants. And many of them are really, if you want to talk about them, they're geniuses. They actually work sometimes much more than 8 hours a day. They'll work 12 hours, 16 hours a day. I know because I have been working on projects with the Institute of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and I've seen them work around the clock and get called at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And they are constantly battling for the nation's health. These are highly competent, high-performing individuals that we have got to respect and hopefully understand how critical their role is in our nation's defense against disease. So as we're going forward, we have to make sure that we are doing due diligence when we are examining these systems and making sure that we're not, pulling out of position essential roles that people need to play in our defense against public health problems. Many of these people also are involved with veterans. We have veterans who are in centers, and we've heard, of people in the past, throughout the decades, of outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease, for example, in healthcare facilities. These are the people who go out and detect things like that to protect the population of people who are living there. Many of them are veterans. And so this is something that is critical for us to protect our nursing homes and our seniors, who are really our diamonds in the community. They have a lot of wisdom, have served our country in many different capacities. But particularly our veterans have, put their lives on the line: World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, and in Operation New Horizon. So we actually have multiple people who are in positions where, if they have disabilities caused by the active duty service in combat situations where they've lost limbs or end up having a head injury or end up having respiratory problems, where they're more susceptible to diseases or to infections that are spread. We really pay attention to that and make sure that we don't take the legs out from under the healthcare system that's protecting them. Right now, I know that there are many things there always is fraud, waste, and abuse in any system that you look at. I haven't found one that didn't have some degree of that. And then there's some credence to what is being said about that. But the stepwise approach, as people are looking at this, to make sure that they're being very sensitive to the overall positive impact that these healthcare systems and federal employees make on the lives of our veterans and on our communities, because it's not just protecting the veterans, it's protecting our communities overall. We're seeing more in the way of natural disasters too, fires, those kinds of things. So those are the things that I think are really important as we're going forward, to make sure that people are following the right path to right-size the government, but also be sensitive to some of the repercussions of certain sensitive positions that are needed to prevent any harm being done to the people who are being serviced by these agencies. So as time goes on, I know that the administration is trying to do the best it can to try to protect people as they're going through and making changes. But the sensitivity to this is really critical for people to focus upon and understand what the repercussions of certain moves are. We have, a great amount of help because we do have professionals who understand these issues. So the guidance they can provide is really incredible. We can actually gain a lot by making sure that we have the experts we need at the table that are going to focus on the needs of the people who are being covered by various agency activities. And we also have an issue surrounding the protection of our children. So children, as I was mentioning previously, one death already from from the advent of having someone who was unvaccinated as a child to succumb to measles. I am really feeling so greatly impacted by that professionally, and because I feel it was a medical system failure not to make sure that child would receive some protection, or that people were educated about the need in the right way for vaccination. And my heart goes out to the family that lost a child. That's a terrible loss. And it's something that I think people should take to heart, that these things do happen. And if you can protect your children and make sure you're doing the right thing for them, get credible sources and make sure that you are protecting your children to the greatest extent you can. I have, dealt with these things so many times in the infectious disease realm over the years of practicing, and have seen what can happen when people don't follow basic guidelines, vaccination guidelines. In Illinois, we're, making sure we're, trumping that horn. But we have a great director of public health at the Illinois Department of Public Health, Dr. Vora, and the steps that are being taken are in a positive direction, realizing, what this outbreak could mean, for the nation, not just Illinois. So, I really implore people to, get, information. There's a CDC website you can go to, cdc.gov, and find out more information. Always wish RFK Jr. The best, because our nation depends on getting the correct care and information so that we can have a strong public health system. And it's really important to emphasize that without certain people being there, we lose that connectivity. One of the things that I have is that actually one of my speakers who will be coming on is actually is an accredited veteran service officer who's really familiar with the needs of veterans and has been dealing with this for many, many years. This is something that I think is going to become more important, and making sure that families like the family that was affected by the loss of a child, families like the Gold Star families that have lost a veteran overseas, they fought for a nation that would protect the people within the nation, and including their families. So those Gold Star families deserve the best possible care we can give. because they made an ultimate sacrifice. It's not just the passing of a military person, but the passing of and a broken heart that remains in the families that had that service member give their lives for a noble cause. And so they deserve to have, a functional government. There are many people who've looked at, Medicare and Medicaid and those kinds of things. And I think most Americans say that they really want a functional, a government that is, free of fraud, waste, and abuse, but at least a functional government to a level that is going to provide certain protections. That's the first duty of a government, is actually to protect its people. And that those protections, I think, can be formalized as time goes on, and we'll see how things unfold. But we have got to give support to those people who are shaping those decisions, and make sure that we, also let them know how those decisions are affecting us, but making sure that we are supporting the overall initiative. Too much is at stake for division, and for people to be, so polarized in the country. We're talking about very, very serious things. The life and the sanctity of a child, the life and sanctity of a veteran who's in a veterans facility, their family members and their children who need to be supported and protected. And as time goes on, we may, see more people leaving the VA system. It's projected, about 83,000 VA employees will be, let go over the next year. But I'm hoping that it's done with keeping in mind the veterans who are actually deserving of that care, and their families. This is part of our community. They're your neighbors and your teachers, your crossing guards, your police officers, your attorneys, your doctors, your nurses. Many of them would be our veterans, and you would be surprised. Veterans have a tendency to be a little bit more reserved, not braggadocious. They have a tendency to take their oath to the nation to protect it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, very seriously, and are some of the best, most professional people I've known in my lifetime. I've worked both in the military for 26 years and in the private sector for an equal amount of time. I was in the Army National Guard. So those things are true, is that some of the most professional, the most dedicated people I saw in my lifetime, the ones with the most merit, were military personnel. They go above and beyond the call of duty. There are not many times where you would find someone who's willing to put on a uniform, to jump into a Jeep, into a tank or a striker vehicle or a helicopter, to face gunfire in the name of their nation and the security of their nation, for making barely more than minimum wage. So the motivation for these military personnel wasn't, money, and it wasn't glamour or, acknowledgement. Most of them are much more circumspect than that, and they really are pretty modest. They don't like to always show, all the things that they've done because they feel it's part of their duty and their service. And so we have to respect those people who have these skills. They have the ability to go into corporate America jobs. They usually outperform people because they take whatever they're doing seriously, and many corporations understand that and selectively seek out veterans for especially leadership positions. And this is something that we have to keep in mind as we're seeing these cuts and layoffs. About 30% of the federal workforce is actually veterans. And that is an astounding number for any group to have that much of a market share, if you will, in a particular discipline or profession. So I implore you to really look around and to protect your veterans and your community if you see that they're in need of things. Many people have disabilities, of course. They've lost a leg or an arm. They've experienced an improvised explosive device or an IED explosion or a rocket propelled grenade RPG explosion, and have had somatosensory impacts from that, loss of hearing, some loss of vision, some with post-traumatic stress disorder. And those are some people who are vulnerable in our community. And as we go through time with many of the things that are happening right now with the natural disasters, those other things don't stop. And this is something that we have got to make sure that people understand, that people who serve in these employment situations are our best, our most meritorious people, the ones who come home with medals because of their bravery, a Purple Heart because of their sacrifice, a Purple Heart because they became a casualty and made the ultimate sacrifice for this country. We've got to understand and respect them. And the price of freedom is not free. So we have got to make sure that we understand the sacrifices that these veterans have gone through. They're our public servants. They're our fathers, our sons, our mothers, our daughters, our aunts and uncles. Men and women have served this nation for many, many decades. And we have to respect and honor their service by making sure that they are secure, not just in their person, but in their employment. And we need to make sure that if they need medical care, they still receive it, and that someone puts out a hand to help them up when they fall down. And with that, I'm going to leave it there. And Dr. Britt will be in the segment 2 for this discussion. And I am just deeply ingratiating that you would spend your time with us to talk about the needs of veterans. Thank you.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618.
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Good evening. Welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. I'm your host, U.S. Army Combat Medic and Flight Surgeon Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold, U.S. Army National Guard, retired. I have a special guest speaker. When I first saw him, he was giving a talk at my VFW post 311, and I ran across the room and grabbed him. I was trying to grab his shoes before he moved, and I didn't want him to get away. I said, this guy's got to be on my show. He is such an outstanding veteran services officer. But our guest speaker tonight is Victor Somoza. He is an Army combat and veteran accredited veteran service officer who has been assisting veterans as a VSO since 2017. He enlisted in the United States Army as an infantryman in May 2005 and was assigned to the 3rd ID or Infantry Division, 1st Brigade Combat Team in Fort Stewart, Georgia, and deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation New Dawn. He received the Army Commendation Medal for Valor and the Combat Infantryman Badge. He received an honorable discharge in 2015 after sustaining wounds in Nangarhar province in Afghanistan. Victor joined the VAC Cook County in September of 2024. He also serves as a VFW District 5 service officer. This last part, I may have to bring him on for a separate show, but he said in his free time, he enjoys poker, networking with other veterans, and spending time with his wife, Nancy, and their 10 kids. I can't understand how you're even awake right now, but that's another story. That's for another show. But welcome, Victor. Really glad to have you on. But you gave such an outstanding speech and talk at our post. I just was really blown over by it. And in this time that we are in, it's so important to have a veteran service officer who really understands our veterans. And I feel you do. So, what are some of the activities and functions that are veteran service officers involved in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Dr. Arnold, for having me on today. That's an amazing introduction as well. Awesome. Oh. But some of the things that we're involved in is community outreach. We want to spread the word of what we do with the VACs and what we're trying to do. Specifically, services that we offer. We're mandated by Illinois law to offer just and necessary services to veterans in the county. So we do that by providing financial programs. If a veteran needs help with their rent, bills, maybe they need transportation to and from a doctor's appointment, then we provide those services. We also provide food cards. We provide hygiene cards. It's all based on eligibility. You have to meet certain requirements, and veterans can call our office to get those. But in a nutshell, a general or honorable discharge, and you have to fall beneath a specific income level. So yeah, I'm introducing this year, we're offering a claims assistance program. So that's what they brought me to Cook County for, specifically to focus on building the foundation of the program. And we're going to bring on plenty of other VSOs in the near future to kind of get us to where we need to be, especially in that southwest Cook County region that I hear so much about. I'm not too familiar with it, but I know that the need is there. I've been here since September, And I have many veterans from that area calling about services that we offer, specifically claims. They don't know what they don't know. So that's what we're trying to do, build the foundation of that so that way we can get the word out there. Right now we're focused on outreach. So I've been working a lot with my counterpart, Connor, on that field. And yeah, we're just excited to go forward.
Yeah, I'm so in awe of you because, I know you served as an M240 gunner, a Bradley gunner, and a team leader. I mean, that's high speed, bravo. You're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But you also pursued a degree in business management, and that was for your Chapter 31 VR&E VA benefits. What was that about?
So that's the thing. When I got out in 2015, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't know anything about the VA. I didn't know VACs existed. I just kind of, I was wounded in Afghanistan, and they kind of told me, hey, you can't do your infantry job anymore. So you're either going to reclass or you got to go. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go. I don't really want to do anything else, So I was medically retired. It was a smooth process. But when going through ACAP or TAPS, whatever they call it now, that VR&E program came about. Like any other veteran getting out, it's a scary situation because you go from literally full-time active duty where there's hospitals and there's PX, there's everything around you that you need. All of a sudden, now you're going to get out and you need to find healthcare. You need to figure out what you're going to do for work. So whether you're going to go to school or not. So pay attention during those classes because admittedly, I fell asleep during that entire 2 weeks about processing. So I didn't really pay attention to any of the benefits that were there. I just kind of was like, I'll figure it out when I get out there. But I didn't. So VR&E was introduced, and I was already receiving a rating from the VA when I was getting out because of the whole, it's called the IDES process. When you're getting medically retired, they work with the VA to kind of, so it could be a smooth transition. So I was fortunate. Not a lot of veterans get that. Some just ETS. Some retire and don't get to go through that process. So I was fortunate enough to go through that. VR&E set me up with a position at the Social Security Administration in Temple, Texas. I was in Fort Hood at the time. And that was a program that you went to and you got a federal position as like an intern or whatever. And then after 6 months, they decided to keep you on or not. But I wanted to come back to Illinois. So after that, we just came back to Illinois. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. Was I going to go to school? Was I going to get a job? Was I going to do the cliche thing and be a police officer or some sort of, infantry type job? I didn't know. So I went back to school with the VR&E program because my service-connected disabilities, there was a serious employment handicap with it. So I was eligible for that. But I didn't know anything about the program even then. Someone who was sitting behind a desk kind of signed me up for that, but they didn't really do a good job explaining it. So when I found out about the VAC, and at that time I lived in Lake County, Illinois, I was told that they can help me with my VA claim. And I sought them out. I saw that they had other services, and I just got curious. And then I'd come to find out there's VACs in almost every county in Illinois. Not quite yet, but as a state association, we're working on that. A lot of the southern counties don't have VACs. But by the way, I feel like I'm rambling, but the point of that was
no.
VR&E was very important because it allowed me to kind of, go to school. Because when I was going to school, I got a position as a VA work study. That's one of the benefits that you can receive if you're going more than 3/4 time and using the VA education benefit. So I got introduced to the VA side of the house. And that is just that's when I really came to know that veterans benefits existed. And this was just education benefits. There was a whole nother part of the house that dealt with compensation, disability, pensions, so it's just VA programs, just a vast amount of information, and veterans don't have time to really pay attention to that. So that's why there's nerds like me who go through accreditation training. They learn the process and make it easier for veterans to kind of seek those services. So every time there's a veteran in front of me and I'm providing that that support for them, advocating for them, helping them with their claim. I always picture myself on the other side of that because that was me. I didn't know anything. So my goal is just to pretty much provide the information, advise, make them kind of, know what programs are available. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to make a decision on what route they want to take, whether I'm working on a VA claim with them and we have, a few conditions that we need to navigate because they were denied. So I always try to involve them, make them part of it. They need to go out there and seek those disability benefits questionnaires from their VA providers. And that's another topic. Providers, doctors, they play a huge role in this. They can provide the veteran with information, with certain documents that can help their claim. So working with their providers is kind of essential for that.
Wow, this is such a critical role. I mean, the way you're explaining it is, I can't see, not having, like you said, having more VSOs rather than less, because this is a critical role. This is actually stabilizing not only the veteran, but their entire family network, right? Because they have children, they have a spouse, they're trying to seek employment and don't know which way to turn. And you are actually stopping them from going through pain.
Absolutely. And you said it, nailed it right on the head, or
yes.
Whatever it is. That's what you did. The law's clear, the Military Veterans Assistance Act. That's what mandates VACs to provide those services. That says for veterans and their families. So yeah, we need to, every county is different. I've had the honor of serving in 3 different counties. This is my 3rd county VAC. But every county I've noticed has different needs. Of course, there's always going to be the veteran suicide, which is at the top of the list. What programs are we going to create to battle that veteran suicide? Other veterans, counties, they have, maybe they need to develop transportation programs, or maybe they see that there's a lot of elder issues, veterans who are, aren't eligible for VA pensions, for VA compensation, but they still have elder needs. Maybe there's caregiver programs that we can create. So that's our hope with Cook County. As we build the VA claims assistance program, eventually we'll have some sort of stakeholders meeting. We'll get everyone to the table and figure out what's needed in this region. So far, that foundation we've created, Cook County is huge. Mm-hmm. We created 3 separate divisions. Northwest, there's Chicago and the western suburbs, and then there's Southwest, so Division 1, 2, and 3. So it's our goal that within the next couple of years that we'll have a team of VSOs at each division. Mm-hmm. in the community. We'll just meet the veteran where they're at. And then as we grow, we just multiply, grow exponentially, see what happens.
And then you also, you did, your history is that you also, are, with the VFW and also, serving in that capacity as well. So in District 5. So, why is it important for a service officer, right, to be intimately involved with the VFW? What's the importance of that?
VACs wouldn't exist without veteran service organizations. That's just fact. In order to establish a VAC, veteran service organizations need to come together and appoint delegates and alternates. Mm-hmm. There is some legislation that was introduced, Senate Bill 2018, that's going to make those positions, if passed, make those positions elected positions, which the VFW disagrees with. Those positions should be appointed by that veteran service organization, veterans helping veterans. So hopefully, witness slips will come into play, and then people will put those out there. But it's very important for VAC. VACs are the veteran service organizations. Mm-hmm. We don't report to Cook County. We report to the Veterans Assistance Commission. In that commission, we have 52, I believe the count was so far, 52 veteran service organizations in Cook County. It's amazing. So yeah, we're working together to bring these programs to veterans in Cook County and their families.
Yeah. So, I mean, so you're actually, a lot of people look at things and say, oh, well, they're just providing a service for someone. It's not like I'm going to get a car wash, right? And well, yeah, there's a service out there, but you're deeply connected to the roots of the community. So this actually has implications for the safety and security of a community, and how people are able to thrive, and how they exist within a community-based setting. Providing physical, healthcare needs, mental health care needs, making sure that they have a place to stay and sleep. And we have too many veterans on the street. We all know that, that are homeless, that need that. So even with the VSO, you're helping veterans within the VFWs to stabilize their lives so they can actually serve the homeless veterans as well. We do like stand downs where we bring, people who are homeless veterans, give them food and clothing and things that they need because of the inclement weather, especially in this area, where it gets freezing sometimes. And so, making sure that we protect those people that protected us. And, I can't go to sleep at night, put my head on a pillow and, go to the lullaby land and wake up, and say, oh, the birds are singing, without thinking about, someone's on the street right now that doesn't have this, that was a veteran, that was one of my combat buddies, that shouldn't be out there and shouldn't be on the streets. So the VSO plays a really critical role. And, because one of the things I always said is that when you join the VFW, it is not only about you, but all of us veterans that need you. So these veterans who are out there, they need to get engaged with the VFW. They need to come there because your VSOs are there too, to give them service and for them to understand that there is someone who cares about you. And not only that, but we want you to care about us by showing up and being part of us.
Absolutely. No, you said it. I always encourage veterans, come to our meetings, come to the VAC commission meetings, whatever county you live in. I know our commission meets quarterly, but whatever county you live in, if you're a veteran or a family member, and you don't see these veteran services in your area, go to those meetings. Find out why these services aren't in your area. Ask those questions. There's a public comment section for every meeting that the public can just come and address those concerns. But the Illinois law is clear. We shall furnish these or provide these just services. So yeah, I'm just excited to be a part of it.
Yeah. Do you have any success stories you want to talk about? You don't have to mention names and that kind of thing, but how do you identify data?
Yeah, because you mentioned that's what it's all about, and it is. There was specifically when I was in McHenry County, that's when I first started doing this. It was 2018. And I was new to the game, of course. But over time, I was helping the same person would come in for financial assistance. And there, again, every county is different. Our county offers programs, and they're either once a year, every 6 months, different needs, where other counties can have maybe month-to-month assistance with a veteran. If they need help with their light bill next month and they're eligible, they can come again. It depends on the budget. It depends on what those needs are. In McHenry County, we had it where it was a month to month. So I was helping a veteran every month for like 2 years. And then finally, I'm like, oh man, there's got to be other things this veteran's eligible for. And I saw that he was already service connected at 20%. And I was okay. Well, it's all, some physical conditions, maybe some things worsened. Why don't we talk to him about that? So we just start development from there. He came in for financial assistance. We helped him out with, I think it was $122 towards his ComEd bill. And we established an intent to file. And intent to files are crucial. Veterans who don't know about intent to files, that's just the VA giving you the opportunity to establish the effective date of the claim. You file that, and they give you 1 year to work with an accredited representative, or do it on your own, but hopefully work with an accredited representative to submit a claim. If it's favorable, it'll be backdated to when you file that, potentially. There are some other factors that come into play, but either way, that veteran, we established that. And then I was like, let's work together this next year. Let's see how your physical things are, but pay attention to other conditions, because secondary conditions that's where really things come into play with an accredited veteran service officer. There's maybe almost every veteran I know qualifies for hearing loss and or tinnitus, just because it's the number one claimed disability for one, but it's just almost every veteran was exposed to noise at some point. And of course, the VA is going to do their due diligence and look at their entrance and exit exams, those audiology reports. Tinnitus is subjective, so that's, but either way, that's good. And veterans say, yeah, I got this, but it's only 10% for tinnitus. I'm like, okay, it's a win. It's a win. Yeah. But pay attention to other conditions. What does tinnitus cause? There's numerous other conditions that cause, and maybe you're just living with it. Because for the longest time, veterans, well, I guess I speak for myself, but I know that some veterans ignore the doctor. They don't want to go into a doctor's office, so they may ignore things and they just live with it. Over-the-counter medications, some do self-medications. It's horrible, but they live with the symptoms. It's just it's not diagnosed. They need to work with the veteran service representative to at least get that paperwork filed. Start connecting the dots. Work with the veterans provider. Maybe draft some nexus statements, but get those connected. Because even though that 10% rating for tinnitus, it just gets you that 167 a month, I believe it is right now. But what about the sleep disturbances it causes? Maybe the headaches because of the frequencies. And, so it's just things can be connected. That's how they combine. And with that, this veteran was able to get, from that 20% rating coming in for ComMed bills for $127 every month for 2 years. We got him about $33,000 in back pay, up to 90%. So still fighting that IU. But it's just, it changed his life. It changed his life. That's just one story. There's other, numerous times where veterans, their quality of life just improves with this life-changing experience that they have. So
that's fantastic. And I was going to say, what do you say? Because I have some loss of hearing on my left ear and tinnitus in my left. I had an RPG land in Iraq when I was there and blew me to the ground. But that was a whole nother story. But, you reminded me of one particular patient I had. And I joined the military because I was so disgusted with how people were being treated in the VA system back in, the veteran hospital back in the 1980s. So it's changed quite a bit, since then. But it was like 1984. So every time I saw my, recruiter, but he's passed on now. But I would shake his hand and go, "Sss," and he goes like, "What's that?" I said, "That's the sound of the devil." Shaking a hand of the devil. He would laugh. But so a few years after joining the military, I went into residency, and then I remember taking care of a patient who was a veteran, and he was really, deeply ill because of his alcoholism. And his liver was failing, magnesium was off, calcium. I had to stay up all night for 2 days in a row, literally didn't sleep, and made sure that everything was balancing because he could have had a cardiac arrest, and, really took care of him. And when he started coming through, I said, you can't keep living like this, because he was, arguing with his wife and all that kind of stuff. It was PTSD and some other things going on. So, I really worked with him and got him to get some counseling and stuff like that before he left the hospital. So this was about 9 years later. I was sitting in my, I was in a hospital sitting down, and this guy walks by and he goes like, "Hey, you don't remember me, do you?" And I was like, "Uh-oh, should I remember you?" And he said, "No, I'm the guy you took care of." And he said, after that, you, whatever you said, it made sense to me. And now I'm a pastor. He became a pastor of a church, went back for his divinity degree, and changes, 100-degree change, 180-degree change in his life. So it's really just having the caring and compassion, and you exhibit that every day. Because what you're doing is impacting people and creating miracles in people's lives. You may not even know the final outcome of some of those things because, but you're having a dramatic effect. This saves the nation a lot of money. People are worried about money, but it also saves the dignity of the nation in being able to show the respect they should be to our veterans.
Absolutely.
So what do you envision for the future for, the VSO? What's the AI version of the VSO?
Absolutely. I'm really excited about that. It's kind of, I've been getting a lot of phone calls lately, help. And I'm only one person right now, but in 2 weeks, we'll be onboarding our VSO manager. We're excited about that. And then we're currently actively hiring 2 new VSOs this year. But next year in May, we're going to sit down for a budget meeting. And I've already forewarned our superintendent. I'm like, we're going to definitely, hit the ground running. And she's all for it. Very supportive. She's managing from up there, putting all the pieces in place, and we're excited about it. So hopefully we'll check back in a couple of years. We'll have us back on, and we can talk about what we've been doing.
Yeah, I can't think of a better investment of money. I really can't. Taking care of those people who cared enough to take care of the country, and keeping us safe. And so, any kind of wishes for you, or what do you think? Because you're saying that you're adding more VSOs, but what would you like to see from the response from the community and from veterans themselves? Like, I'm part of a VFW Pulse, so what should I be doing to make sure people talk to you?
Absolutely.
Get engaged.
Attend those meetings. I was just in a post VFW meeting for my VFW out in 12014 Crystal Lake. And I was given a service officer report. And part of our post, we provide specific, it's kind of like a food program where we provide $50 to veterans or a family member. And I have 7 people in that group right now, but I just became post service officer maybe about 8 months ago. So these veterans have been on that program for years. And I was like, well, we're a small post. We don't even have a post home. And I know that we have a VAC in this county, in McHenry County. So I would like for veteran service organizations to lean more on their VACs. They're funded by law to provide these services. So I would, and one of the comments I got, well, the veteran service officer used to refer veterans to us, but that was the problem. VAC should not be referring to VFWs for assistance when it should be the other way around. Those VFWs need to be sending those veterans to us. And we, from there, if we can't figure it out, we have referral services, and we won't just send you there. We'll do a warm handoff. We'll make sure we'll figure out the problem together. So it's pretty much.
Well, how can people get in contact with the office and Cook County office? Any telephone numbers, emails, or anything that you want to provide?
Absolutely. Facebook is probably the best bet because it's always updated, and we're very active on that. So definitely look us up on Facebook, Veteran Assistance Commission, Cook County. Give us a call directly, 312-433-6010.
Oh, get that number one more time.
Area code 312-433-6010.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. So, we're running out of time, but it's been phenomenal, Victor. And I'm sure I'm going to get you back on again. Once I grab your feet, you're in line for life. But really invaluable information. I learned a lot myself listening to you. So thank you. And carry on.
Absolutely. Take care, Dr. Arnold. Thanks.
All right.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618.
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
ADAPHP Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Good evening. Welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. I'm your host, U.S. Army Combat Medic and Flight Surgeon Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold, U.S. Army National Guard retired. And I have a special guest speaker today. Before I introduce him, this is one of the most groundbreaking articles I've read in a very long time. It has some insights that are just spectacular. I think people really need to know the content of what he's saying. I wish every congressional member would read what he has written. But our guest speaker is a Kaiser Family Foundation Health News guest panelist, Naum N. Levy. KFS is the independent source for health policy research, polling, and journalism. And he's written an outstanding article. I actually put this in my file because I need to read it again and again. But it's Republicans once wanted government out of healthcare. Trump voters see it differently. And this was an article written on the KFF Health News on February 27th, 2025. I encourage you to go and read the original article. But welcome, Noam. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me, Doctor.
Okay, great. But you really you hit the nail on the head. I had never really thought about things quite as deeply as you have indicated in what you've outlined. Talking about lower prices for gas and groceries and other essentials, but supporters of the administration wanted to avoid Medicaid cuts as well, as you're saying. And so maybe you can tell us more about the article and your perspective on this.
Sure thing. And let me apologize for the light here. I had to be in my car this evening, so I do apologize for that. But it's good to be with you. And thanks so much for your interest in our reporting, Dr. Arnold. Yeah, as you just by way of some additional background, we here at KFF Health News cover healthcare across the United States. I've been covering this system for the better part of 15 years now, most of it at the Los Angeles Times, and I came over here a couple of years ago. And I don't think it probably is a surprise to anybody that folks struggle with big medical bills. Anybody who knows anybody who's been to the doctor or, God forbid, the hospital knows that, when you go to the hospital, you go to the ER, you can't get out of the ER, with a hangnail for less than $3,000. And that just puts enormous strain on people's lives and people's finances. And I've been sort of digging into the problems that those big bills represent for people for several years now, looking particularly at the issue of medical debt. And, one of the things that medical debt does for people, as you probably know, is it just has this ripple effect through people's lives. It makes it harder to get groceries, to afford a mortgage, to put your kids through college, to save for retirement. And I say all this as background to what the article that you mentioned, which is a political article, and the article explored what it is that people who voted for Donald Trump really want from the federal government on healthcare. And most of the people who voted for Donald Trump are Republicans, not surprisingly, and Republicans historically have tended to look more skeptically at government, and particularly at government regulation. There's been and I'm a former political reporter. I covered presidential campaigns in the past, and the talking point that Republican politicians, going back to Ronald Reagan and earlier, were get the government out of my life. Government's the problem, and let's let markets solve our problems. And the interesting thing that is coming to light, and that we surfaced hopefully in this article, is that there seems to be kind of a shift underway in the way that everybody in this country, but particularly Republicans and Trump voters particularly, are thinking about what's the appropriate role for government in healthcare. And informing that is what I was just talking to you about, this incredible strain that medical bills and medical debt are putting on people. And it's feeding this sense, I think, among a lot of people across the political spectrum, that markets are not going to solve this for us in healthcare, and that we need government to step in and start pretty aggressively regulating what hospitals are charging, what drug companies are charging, what health insurers are charging. And that's a big change from maybe just 10 or 15 years ago, when I think most Republican voters would have still said, get the government out of it. Let's let the hospitals do what they do. Let the doctors do what they do. And if there was just less regulation, we could afford to go to the doctor. And so there's been this big change going on, and it's interesting at this moment. I'll stop talking here in a second, but it's interesting at this moment because, of course, the new administration, the Trump administration, is quite busily cutting away at government right now.
Yes, yeah. No, and that's really a good, excellent point. And I mean, that was really the, part of the crux of the thing that I was mentioning when I said this was a groundbreaking article that I think people need to read to understand really what is going on in the intricacies of the relationship between voters, Republican and Democratic, but particularly Republican. And their perspective on how these systems are working. What are they trying to get out of the system? All of us know that there's fraud, waste, and abuse in almost any system we look in. Going from the gas station to the federal government, there's always something going on. And you mentioned also there was a high healthcare costs that are being confronted by people. But they're looking for a cap on out-of-pocket expenses. There may be some potential solutions that are really more focused on, the support is blaming the health insurers, the drug companies and hospital systems, that the government, maybe the government has a role there to play to protect them. Because the essential and first, really most critical function of a government is to protect the people. So that's something that I think they may be turning more towards.
I think that's right. But I think the other thing that's worth noting is that this is different from the way that people may think about other parts of the economy. So, I don't think Republican or Trump voters want the government coming in and setting airline prices or dictating, whether, we heard a lot during the campaign about electric vehicles. They don't want the government telling people what kind of cars they can buy. If I want to buy a Dodge pickup with a Hemi, I want to be able to buy that. Don't tell me to buy don't tell me to buy an electric vehicle, but that there's something about the way people are thinking about healthcare, that they're so fed up and they feel the system is so stacked against them. And again, I would think many of your viewers would be able to relate to this, that, I've interviewed hundreds of patients over the last few years across the country about their struggles with the healthcare system. And, I've sat in people's living rooms, at their kitchen tables, in their backyards, their front porches, and the stories that you hear of the challenges that people face when they have gone to the hospital, particularly, but even with other medical providers, are just astonishing. People feel like, I got a bill that I couldn't understand. Why were they charging me for this? I thought my insurance company was supposed to cover that. Why am I getting charged $2,000? I didn't even get to see the doctor when I went to the emergency room or the hospital, or that doctor talked to me for 30 seconds, but I got a $500 bill. In all of those kinds of experiences, I think, are feeding this sense of frustration that the system's broken, and that something more radical has to happen. And I want to be careful not to overstate this, in the sense that, Democrats historically have beat the drum for Medicare for all, right? They want everybody to be in a government health insurance plan. They love the VA as a model. It looks a lot like what the system is like in the UK or in Canada. Everybody has the same health insurance. And I think a lot of Americans, and particularly Republicans and Trump voters, are still skeptical of that, moving everybody into a government health plan. But the thing that they're really open to are these regulatory interventions. And so I was interviewing, for example, Bob Ward, who's a Republican pollster. His firm, Fabrizio Ward, did the polling for Trump's campaign in November. And they were asking folks, how would you feel about the government setting hospital prices? So like every hospital had to charge the same price for an x-ray or, a knee replacement or what have you. And they found that 75% of Trump voters supported that. And Bob told me, actually, that in some ways undercounts it, because the question they were asking was, well, should the government limit how much hospitals can charge to like 2 times what Medicare pays? Everybody pays differently. Medicare pays one rate, and Blue Cross Blue Shield pays another, and Aetna pays another. And this is part of the problem that we're talking about here. Anyway, they asked people, what would you think if hospitals couldn't charge more than 2 times what Medicare did? And some people were opposed to that, but not because they didn't want the government regulating. They thought that sounded like too much. Like, wait, why should they be able to charge 2 times as much as the federal government is paying for Medicare? And so, again, people are just fed up out there, and as Bob said, they're ready for anybody to step in and try to impose some order.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because you're really talking about. I love the issue you brought up about the differential effect of regulation depending on what the particular issue is. That it's really healthcare specific and not just what car you're buying and that kind of thing. And and then also having more of a focus on debt limits for medical practices and hospitals, and that kind of thing needs to be set. And there was a mention that was made in your article also about the country needs a businessman, not a politician. So it's more of a business focus on how to get things done. So that may have been some of the impetus to put someone in that position. People may have felt that. When I was the director for the Illinois Department of Public Health from 2007 to 11, and I had a chance to go to Taiwan. And when I went there, the director of public health there took me on a tour of some of the facilities, and they have a pretty much a public healthcare system, but it's their medical system is actually integrated, across the platform. And so you walk into an office, and I said, well, how do you get treated? And he said, well, you have a card that you insert into the machine. It's like, you have a credit card, and it actually, you put your number in. The provider authenticates who you are, and then they put their number in, and then all of the medical records since you were born come to that computer. So they have a really integrated IT system. And I started asking him, I said, well, how do you put this system together? And he said, well, we copied your Medicare system, and we copied your Department of Defense system for health. and then I said, well, how do you get all the integration with the IT infrastructure? And he said, he looked at me and it sent a chill up my spine. He said, we make the microchip. So they were designing microchips to carry out the functions they wanted. So they had a really pretty, functionally operational system, but you never saw a bill as a patient. Now, of course, they had a semi-dictator there who told the companies, you pay, 50% of the cost, up to 95%, 50% of that would be you, 50% the government. The other 5% going from 0 to 5 would be dependent on whether you were unemployed for 0 or, highly employed 5, to make quite a bit of money. And so that's how they balanced that system. And so you never saw anything. And you took your card out the machine, you went to the pharmacy and got your medications, the same process with the pharmacy anywhere on the island. And so I think there is a way of having the efficiency we need in the system. And now we're moving away from a system where we were looking at more of a focus on, delivering a standardized care model where we have the same provision of care at, for every patient that comes in with heart disease, we're going to do this. And now we're becoming more individualized with AI, and it's becoming more complex. So I think, this idea of a debt limit would be really important to control the system so it doesn't spin out of control, because you can go in and get 1 million tests done.
Yeah, I mean, we are the only really wealthy country in the world that does this this way. And I've not been to Taiwan, but I've spent time in other health systems in Europe and Germany and the UK and the Netherlands and elsewhere. And one of the things that really people think that other countries, that they just have government run systems, and we could never have a government run system in this country, and we'd never go for it. And, it's true. There are countries like the UK that have basically everybody has government health care, sort of like Medicare but not even like Medicare, because Medicare is a government insurance, but the providers are private. But you look at other countries like Germany or the Netherlands, they have largely private systems. The doctors are private. The insurers are functionally not government. They're more like nonprofit. But the thing that really distinguishes them is that they regulate the prices that providers can charge, kind of like we regulate electricity, right? You can't just charge whatever you want if you're an electric company. It's a highly regulated industry because we've decided as a country that electricity is important, and we don't want private equity companies running up the price of electricity so we can't turn the lights on. And the other thing that these other countries do is they put really firm limits on how much it costs if you go to, the doctor or the hospital. In Germany, for example, if you fill a prescription at the pharmacy, it's never more than 10 euros, which is about like $11.
Right.
And like, that's it. Like, and now that if you go to CVS and you're filling a prescription there, you can be in line with like 5 other people who are getting exactly the same drug that you're getting. And you might pay like $130. The guy behind you is going to pay $5. The one behind him is not going to pay anything. And then the guy at the end of the line, he's going to pay $1,000. Like, just because it's all left up to the market to sort of set all these prices. And I think that's what people are responding to that. And I don't think the thing that's interesting is I don't think the political system in our country has sort of caught up to this reality yet. So, Democrats are still running around talking about Medicare for all, and they want to create a government health plan. And Trump and his people are running around talking about how they got to, cut this and that, and this health agency and that health agency, and now they're coming for the VA and they want to cut government. And that's not really in line with what people are wanting either. And so I don't think either party is yet kind of calibrated their vision, their message to what people actually want and what they expect from the healthcare system. I mean, we could probably have this conversation about any number of topics, but this is the world I live in. And certainly in healthcare, I think there is this real disconnect between the political leadership and frankly, also, I think between the people whose job it is to think about healthcare policy. There's a disconnect between the way they talk about this stuff and the way you and I experience this.
Yeah, this is fantastic. One of the things you pointed out is that, Republican leaders have expressed more interest in cutting government than expanding its protections. And that sort of underlies what we've been talking about. And, I've been to Europe many times with the military, but I, have never really studied the healthcare system. But from what you're saying, if you're standing in line and you're spending 11 euros, for a prescription, and it doesn't make a difference what, who you are, what it is, do you think that there is a difference in how companies are operating in Europe versus the United States? Because the lobby groups here are so powerful. So, if you're going up against it, you're going up against the healthcare industry, the unions, the pharmaceutical companies, and they have really ingrained a lot of power in their influence over government.
I think they do, for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have the system, the cockamamie system that we have. I mean, solving this problem is ultimately a political problem, right? It's not a healthcare problem. We have to have the will as a country to decide we want to organize things slightly differently. And, we have seen, just to take pharmaceuticals as an example, that, the last administration, the Biden administration, pushed through a pretty groundbreaking law, actually, to begin to give Medicare the ability to negotiate prices. And actually, they put in a cap on what Medicare beneficiaries could be required to pay every year for their prescription drugs. But they had to fight tooth and nail to do it. And the future of it is now somewhat in doubt because we don't know what the current administration is going to do, really. But I think the fact that they were able to succeed is a mark of that it can be done. It can be done. Yeah. And, the polling that I referenced in my article is really powerful. I mean, again, as a former political reporter, I can tell you that, there are not a lot of questions that get 80-90% approval across this. You could ask people, are you in favor of sunshine? And you might not get that level of support from both Democrat and Republicans. But when you ask questions like, do you think there should be a cap on what people have to pay for medical debt? The support is off the charts. I mean, there is a pent up demand out there for more protections from people's pocketbooks. And, it should be said that the President Obama and the Affordable Care Act that he signed in 2010 aimed to do some of this, but they were not able to, I think, tackle what is the fundamental challenge for most of us patients and our families, which is it's one thing to have insurance, but even if you have health insurance and you get these big bills that drive you into debt or empty your bank accounts, for many people that the perception is I'm not being protected.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I never thought about it in this way until you said it. When you were giving that example of standing in a pharmacy line and my prescription is going to cost $100 and the next person is $5 and the next is $0 and the next person is $1,000, right? It seems like there are responses within the healthcare system to try to control that issue, because you do have some plans that try to chip away at that issue, but it's not universal. So and to have 89% of the people say this is what we need, that's a pretty powerful statement that people are feeling that. But when I was going through training and all that, I was always one of those people who said, well, I believe in a national health system, that we need to have some level of national health care, especially for people who can't afford it, those who are in poverty and those kinds of things, and especially in the rural communities where you don't have access to a lot of medical care. But the other thing I was thinking back then was, why don't we have a national pharmaceutical company? Because if you can't afford to pay for those medications through the normal means, should there be a secondary market, that, is more regulated, that can give you the same medication, but is regulated so that the pricing is not there. And I know there's going to be a roar down at the, down at the congressional bodies and the meetings and that kind of thing from lobby groups, against something like that. But there needs to be some median that we can reach, and that's what it sounds like you're, pushing for. That we have to start addressing these issues and do something about it, right?
That seems to be what people want. That there is this. I think there's this, as I said, a pent up demand really to have somebody come in and help.
Yeah, because that was one of the things too. So what do you think the message is to, currently to the GOP and to Democrats as well, to work together, do something that gets, out of this? Because you were saying about 8 in 10 Republicans backed the $2,300 cap on how much patients could be required to pay annually for medical debt. And that was a survey that I think you referred to from Perry's polling firm for 2023. But 9 in 10 favored a cap on interest rates charged on medical debt, which is another issue, where you can't just dig yourself out the hole. It's almost like taking an adhesion contract or a loan that you can't repay. So, So what about, those things? Is it something that people need to be talking to the congressional members about? Or?
I think so. I mean, and there has, look, I'm based in Washington. I used to cover Capitol Hill. It's obviously a incredibly toxic environment here right now. And I'm not sure what, if anything, can be accomplished, certainly by bipartisanship. But one thing that's interesting is when you look around the country and you look at what states are doing, you are getting a lot more bipartisan interest in addressing some of these issues, particularly medical debt. Medical debt seems to be an issue that both Republicans and Democrats agree needs to be tackled. And it's sometimes in some sort of unusual places, not just, liberal blue states like Minnesota and Massachusetts. And, you've got stuff happening in Florida. You got stuff happening in New Mexico. I mean, these and Republicans are joining it.
Well, Mr. Valet, we have 1 minute to go, but I just want to say one thing. I hope people read this article. It is a sentinel article because I really think you put into very clear terms what people need to be thinking about. And I think you tapped into something that maybe is the beginning of a solution to a healthcare crisis that certainly is looming, as we're going into the future. So thank you very much for your time, and we're gonna have you back on again, so you can't get away from us.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. It was nice chatting with you. Have a nice evening.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618.
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test And we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Good evening. Welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. I'm your host, U.S. Army Combat Medic and Flight Surgeon Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold, U.S. Army National Guard retired. I have a special speaker and an incredible article, which I think is extremely important. You know, being in the medical profession, I read this article and it is so insightful. I think we need to make sure that everyone listening reads this article. Kaiser Family Foundation Health News. That's where you can find the article. But first, our guest speaker is the KFF Health News South Dakota correspondent, Ariel Zions. She is a Claremont, California Pritzker College graduate, proudly serving, and who has previously worked at South Dakota Public Broadcasting, reporting on business and economic development. Before that, she was the criminal justice reporter at the Rapid City Journal and a general assignment reporter at Nogales International on the Arizona-Mexico border. Today's topic is an article she wrote that is really enlightening. I was mentioning that it was written on March 3rd, 2025. And she states that facing doctor shortages ease licensing rules for foreign trained physicians. So it's a question of, you know, foreign trained physicians, how can they enter the United States and how do they set up their practice eligibility? So hello, Ariel, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, fine.
And just really quick, the college I went to is Pitzer, not Pritzker. But I am from Illinois. I grew up in a suburb.
You are. It's not Governor Pritzker's school. It's Pitzer. No. So Pitzer, Pitzer.
Yes, but that's not important.
Yes, that is very important. So now tell us about this. What is going on with this? Requirement for foreign medical graduates who've completed a residency now have to have a requirement for being qualified here in the United States by having going through a second residency. That seems to be the crux of the issue.
Yes. So first, when people think of doctors from other countries, which first of all, 26% of physicians in the United States went to medical school elsewhere. So what most of them are they went to medical school in another country, and this includes Americans. So like Americans, they grew up here, went to high school here, but then they go to college, to medical school, perhaps in the Caribbean or elsewhere, or they may be non-Americans. And then most of them come here to do their medical residency. That's the training they do after they graduate medical school, before they get their full license. This is not about those people. This is about people who go to medical school abroad and do their residency in another country, and then practice in that country, and then want to come here. So this may be people like one of the doctors I interviewed. He's from Afghanistan and he had to flee the Taliban. So a lot are refugees, or they could just be people who, decided to move to the United States. But again, let's say they could have like 10, 20 years of experience in their country, but the rules are until recently that you had to do a US-based residency.
Mhm. Yeah, and then but there's some states that seem that, like you were mentioning in the article, and that's a really an astounding number. First of all, 26% of the doctors, practicing here, and that was from a report that you noted was the Migration Policy Institute report. But you also mentioned that since 2023, it seems that states, at least 9 states, have adopted this, and there are other states now contemplating doing the same thing with bringing those medical providers into the country.
Yes. So what I just described was kind of like how it used to be, but now 9 states have passed laws saying, okay, if you went to a medical school that was comparable to one in the United States and your residency training was also comparable, you had a certain number of years of experience practicing, you're competent in English, you pass the tests that the US doctors have to test. So basically the states say if you meet this list of criteria, you can get a temporary license to practice in their state, and then it can eventually convert into a full license. So basically it lets some doctors, some internationally trained doctors, to fully practice in the US even if they did not do a US-based residency. And then there's like more than a dozen states that are also considering this. And this is all since 2023. It's happening really quickly. It's also important to note that this is just about licensing, the ability to practice. It's not about getting to the country. So these doctors are already here, but maybe they're working as a nurse. Maybe they're a surgical tech. Maybe they're working as an Uber driver. The issue is they can't work in their profession. It's the federal government that's in control of immigration and visas, whether they can come here. But again, just because you're a doctor, perhaps with years of experience, and you move here legally, that doesn't mean you can work here as a doctor.
Yeah, because I've actually during my practice times, I've had seen doctors who were in that situation who were phlebotomists, and I was like, wow, this is a waste of talent, because they were really pretty brilliant people, as I came to know them. And those who qualify, granted, the restricted license to practice, you said, but they still require, I guess, some supervision by another provider, as they're going into the initial phases, maybe the first couple of few years, I guess, when they're practicing before they receive the full licensure. But there were like 10 laws and bills that you noted that required the doctors to work for years in a rural, underserved area. So are you seeing this more like those 8 states, for example? Are you seeing it more that rural states are taking the doctors in, states where you have a much larger area, like if you were in South Dakota or New Mexico, where, you have more of a sprawl of the population? Are you seeing, it being focused on certain states, or is it just in general, states are doing this?
No, I would say it's a mix. I'm looking at the list right now. So first of all, Illinois has passed it. I mean, Wisconsin is one of the states, and Wisconsin has lots of rural areas, but then there's Massachusetts, which I don't believe is very rural. Well, I don't know. I mean, a lot of these states do. So it's Florida, Iowa, Idaho, Illinois, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Virginia, Wisconsin. I mean, to me, what stands out is that it's pretty bipartisan. You're getting
yeah. Red and blue states, yeah.
Yes, but some of the laws, like you said, say, okay, if you want to go through this licensing pathway, kind of in return, you need to work in an underserved area. And that's going to include like urban underserved areas, and then almost all rural areas are going to be considered underserved. And even in states where that's not a requirement, a talking point has just been, we need more doctors. And some of them will go to rural areas. So.
Yeah, because and one of the things that you mentioned in an article that I thought was really interesting was that President Donald Trump has defended the federal visa program that many foreign doctors rely on, in order to gain access, as you were mentioning earlier. But at the same time, there's a tension to tighten immigration rules. So, there is competing interests, not just at the professional level for licensure, but also about immigration status.
Yes, it's really interesting because so there's these, Republican majority legislatures and governors who are approving these bills, even though they may, which again are to help immigrants ultimately, and to help patients, but then they may be in support of cracking down on immigrants in other ways. So what Trump supports is I believe H-1B visa. Let me just double check that. But it's the H-1B visa, which lets like highly skilled people come in when industries they can't find enough people in the United States, and that includes the medical field.
Very interesting. Ah, yeah, that's really interesting.
But people could still be impacted in other ways. So, like one of the executive orders of his is just about increasing scrutiny on applications. So let's say, you're applying for this program that's the visa that still exists, but the intensity of the application is increased, and maybe there's a document that you don't have and you can't find, or it just takes longer. So people could still be impacted by his other immigration related.
Yeah, that's really interesting because there seems to be a focus on, at least in the Trump administration, and from the GOP, and about deregulation. So, making sure that you don't have so many governmental obstacles, to people accomplishing things. So I'm not sure if that falls into that or that has some ramifications on that, but that's interesting.
Well, okay. So this kind of is, you mentioned deregulation. That's what you said? Or
Right, yes.
So this is very much backed by libertarian groups. So libertarians are, they don't quite fit into Republicans, don't quite fit into Democrats, but
right.
They basically favor less government intervention and they especially like with licensing, like one of the things they've been behind is they think it's ridiculous how regulated barbers are, for example. Like they have to go through more training than some other careers. But anyway, so the Cicero Institute has, like, they kind of propose this model. They're libertarian, or maybe, I'm sorry, they might just be conservative, but definitely libertarian leaning. And then the Cato Institute, which is definitely libertarian, has been advocating for this because I think, well, first of all, they do support more legal immigration and just, freedom across borders, and then just focusing on, so making it easier for people to get into business, get into their careers. So it is backed by this more libertarian ideology, but then again, Republicans and Democrats are also supporting it because they might just look at the rule and say, hey, that's not fair, or we just need more doctors. So it is really interesting how it's getting support from all ideologies.
Yeah. One of the interesting points that was in the article too is it was Barbara Parker, an RN. She was a former Republican lawmaker in Arizona, in your article. But it was, they were considering a bill for at least 3 or 4 years in a row. And that they're saying that she was saying that it's really a poor answer to the doctor shortage, because what she was concerned about was that it's making it easier for foreign trained physicians to practice in the U.S. It would be unethical, ethically poaching on doctors from countries with greater healthcare needs. Because if I can make more money in the U.S. and I'm making, a few dollars here, taking care of patients where there's a great need, but there's, very low economic incentive to work. It's more based on what you feel. that people may leave those countries to come here just for the higher level of pay for employment versus, the provision of care to a dire population in need.
Yes. So one of the so this bill has also failed in certain states or been withdrawn. And again, just like the support can be bipartisan, the opposition can also be bipartisan. And yeah, so one of the criticisms is like that they say it's encouraging people to leave countries where they need doctors even more than we do. And then some people are concerned about the quality of the doctors because there is an organization that assesses the quality of international medical schools, but there's not one that assesses the quality of the residency programs. And some of the other countries, it may not even be called a residency. It might have a different name, but so what her and other people's concerns are is how are the medical boards going to have the resources, the time, the knowledge to evaluate the quality of these international residency programs? Because the lawmakers said, okay, we're defining it as, similar rigor, but how do the medical boards know what that is? Some states have included a approved list of countries that are just kind of known to have high quality training. And others are more open-ended. So that's one of the concerns.
Yeah, that's really interesting because they I know that you were mentioning the Federation of State Medical Boards, and then there was the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, and the Intel report and the American Board of Medical Specialties. And what the American Board of Medical Specialties was concerned about was specialty accreditation. So when people come over, that's usually considered to be a higher level than just the general, residency training program where you have you do a fellowship or you get trained in specialized care provision. So there seems to be a couple of hurdles there about the level of training that someone has when they're coming over as well.
Yeah, so there's kind of like two categories of opposition or concern. So one, it would be like, we don't think this is a good idea. Like, we don't think it's ethical. We don't think it's safe. We think it's going to cause problems for patients. That's the one category. The other category is more just like, okay, this is a good idea and maybe it could work, but as of now, there's just like obstacles. So there's people who like the idea, but think it's not actually going to be accessible to a lot of doctors and actually increase the number of doctors in rural areas. And that's because, so let's say they get their to get the temporary license, you need to have a hospital willing to hire them. Well, what if a hospital is saying, well, we don't want to be the guinea pig. We don't want to be the first hospital to hire a doctor in this program. Or a supervisor might say, or, an experienced doctor there might say, I'm not willing to supervise them. I don't want to be responsible. What if the medical insurance, or the malpractice insurance says, you don't follow this doesn't follow the rules in most states. We don't feel comfortable giving them malpractice insurance. Let's say they get over those barriers. While they can get licensed in the state, as of now, they can't get certified by the medical specialty boards, which is handled on a national level. So like, let's say a state will license someone after 2 years of residency. To get the specialty, you may need 3 or more years. So, and then it could just make it hard to get any job, or at least to get a higher paying job. So basically they're saying there's just still going to be really big barriers for them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You were mentioning also, there's some things about, ensuring patient safety and adjustment to cultural differences in the technical side of the U.S. healthcare system. That includes things like the billing system, electronic health records, and all those kinds of things. And he did, touch on the malpractice insurance coverage issue. And those are, seem to be significant barriers, but, obviously people have been able to overcome them because we do have people practicing now, and it seems like the states are becoming more flexible to accomplish this. There's one area, like you also in medical practice, you have your state licensure. That's just one thing, for example. So you have your DEA license on a state level, but you also have to have a federal DEA license that is only applicable to certain states. Not all states are compliant with the federal DEA licensure. So I'm wondering, when it gets to a federal level, that you have a requirement that the state, I guess, I'm not sure if the state can supersede the federal requirement or if they can avoid those federal entanglements.
Okay, well, my understanding is like generally federal rules supersede
state rules, right?
But the DEA, I imagine that the DEA rule just says, okay, this applies to licensed doctors, and if licensing is handled by the states, it seems it may not be an issue, but that's a really interesting question. But yeah, in general, one of the concerns is like there will be this patchwork of different rules in different states. It's going to make it harder for, if a patient moves states, will they know that their doctors will have different licensing rules? There's just some concern about the patchwork of different laws.
Yeah, because that's really interesting. I was wondering also, about disease equivalency, because if you're in Europe, for example, there are some extremely highly skilled trained doctors there, but their degree is like an MB or something, so it's not an MD. And then you also have people who are nurse practitioners. You have physician's assistants as well, and they may feel that they are able to provide the same service, in an area of need, like a rural community, those kinds of things. So is there a tension there, between professions?
So that's the former lawmaker I spoke with. She spoke about that with me. Like, she's like, okay, so one of the criticisms is like, why don't we just focus on recruiting more doctors in the United States, the people who are already here, or expanding the scope of practice for nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, or creating a fast track, degree upgrade program for NPs and PAs, to help them become doctors if they want. Other people say it doesn't have to be either or. We can have this program while at the same time, yes, encouraging NPs and PAs to serve in rural areas and giving them increased autonomy.
Well, this is where I have to really compliment you, because, when you read an article that makes you go and do some research and take a look, your article really inspired me to start looking at things more closely. And I was wondering, like in 2023, they said that less than 10% of U.S. medical school graduates didn't match into a residency program, according to the National Resident Matching Program, that's the NRMP. In 2024, only 93.5% of medical school students matched for a residency. And a lot of that had to do with the types of residencies they're going for. They're going for, dermatology or thoracic surgery, the highly competitive one, versus internal medicine or psychiatry or pediatrics, or family practice, for example. So I'm wondering if there is a need to look at that pipeline as well, about those, medical students who are looking for a residency so that they can also practice it. That's almost like a 10%, surplus to the doctor pool if we, were to look at that and figure out a solution to it. But the probability of matching into a residency program depends on the applicant's qualifications and number of applications they, submit. and the competitiveness of the specialty. So, with an America First policy, is that something we need to be looking at too?
So, yeah, I mean, pretty much everyone agrees we need to create more residency slots. So yes, part of it is like what specialty people are applying to, but in general, I believe there's not enough residency slots. So that's an issue that people are working on. Also, getting more residency slots in rural areas is a priority. One thing that, and he didn't end up in the article, but Dr. Singer from Cato, he's like, let's work on those things, yes, but those are long-term solutions. It's going to take a while to get people through that pipeline, right?
Yes,
to graduate medical school,
right.
to go through their residency. Whereas and at the same time, there are doctors who, like you said, someone you've worked with, who are very talented.
Yes.
And of course, this is still a process they'll have to go through, but at least they'll be practicing as a doctor before they get their full license. So yeah, there's some people who are against this type of program and say, let's just focus on people already in or I guess American citizens. And then there's others who say it doesn't have to be either or.
Yeah. That makes sense, because there's some doctors who I mentioned, they're brilliant. They've had many years of experience overseas and can actually add another dimension. We always talk about, sort of their assimilation into a medical care system here, but they also bring skills and talents that maybe the medical system here could benefit from, different perspectives as well. I was mentioning in another interview I had earlier with, someone else from the brilliant institution, Kaiser Family Foundation Health News. but we were talking about this, and I was talking about, how Taiwan is structured. I used to be the director for the Illinois Department of Public Health from 2007 to 11, and had a chance to visit Taiwan and look at their healthcare system and how they operate. And there's some really valuable lessons to learn from systems outside of our, system here that, maybe people who are coming in could actually bring some of that institutional knowledge with them to help, solve problems that we have internally.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Or what if, they probably all speak other languages. So what if, there could be patients who speak their language. But yeah, and like one of the doctors I spoke with from Afghanistan, he supports these laws. He's like, look, people like me don't need to go through another residency, but he did like the idea of having, whether it's a formal supervisor or like a support network, but just some sort of support, because he says, yes, there are cultural differences. How close you stand to people, eye contact, just, different cultural things. And then just some of the more boring but important things like coding and just getting used to the system. But no, I think that's a good point, that they could also offer things.
Yeah, the coding is very boring. I've been through it too many times.
Yeah.
But, so that sounds really interesting. And, it's really interesting the point you made about, not having a program that overlooks and evaluates residency training programs overseas, but we talk about the medical schools and institutions for training that level. But thank you very much. We're running out of time. I hear the music coming in, but Ariel, we have to have you back on again. This is a great article. I think everyone needs to read this. It's a potential solution to a crisis we're having in the need and shortage of healthcare professionals in this country at the medical doctor level. So thank you very much. And
thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618.
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rob Howard. Glad to be with you today. I'm the CEO of Zodiac Solutions, and we're here on America's Heroes Group because there is a lot going on, and I wanted to just take some time and let's do a reset. Since the last time I was on a month ago, so much has been happening in and around our government, but what I wanted to just let you know some of the planning we have coming up. When we talk about the clean energy industry, sustainability, you've heard all the buzzwords. So what we want to do is each sector, I want to give you an overview today, and then each month we're going to bring people on with sectors that you never thought about. I bet you didn't think your trash was a way for us to get energy. I bet you didn't think your sewage waste was another way to get energy. And the thing about sewage waste is, guess what? 24/7 power, baseload power. But we'll get more to that. I'll send you out some information to let you know who we're going to bring on to talk about those energy sources. But first, there's a lot been going on in our federal government. Veterans have been summarily let go without any reason why. We know the skills that veterans bring to the table, and I'm pretty disappointed in that. But what I'll tell you is this: oftentimes, if you're focused on your mission, then the things surround you can be distractions. And so, regardless of what is going on, we have to adjust. We have to improvise. We have to overcome whatever circumstances we have in front of us. So my conversation with you today is I want to help you understand that, look, there are a wealth of opportunities. And oftentimes when we're forced to make a change, that might be what we need to do. So let's not get frustrated. Let's get focused. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about opportunities in the green energy sector and why that's important. I'm based out of California, and the one thing I can tell you is there are organizations that are working on this green industry, on the green energy industry they're not laying off, not at all. As a matter of fact, they're hiring, and they're hiring I look on social media and I see job postings every day, and those organizations are called community choice aggregators. What does that mean? Everyone knows about utilities, right? They know we've got several investor-owned utilities, but in 2021, state of California, not 2021, in 2011, the state of California allowed community choice aggregators to be formed. What do? Your investor-owned utilities are responsible for the delivery of that electricity. So whether it is coming from a nuclear power plant, a solar field, or a biogas facility. The investor-owned utility is responsible for getting that energy to your home. However, community choice aggregators, just like a power plant is generating electricity, well, the community choice aggregators are allowed to buy and put on the grid that electricity, and with a focus on being affordable, but also being greener. We call them greener and cleaner. So community choice aggregators, as you start looking at those opportunities, and I'll give California as an example because I know a lot more about them, but there are other organizations around the country doing that very same thing. So think about it. It's coming. We're using less coal. We're using less natural gas. We actually have the ability to bring power, and it's not just about solar. So we're going to talk about, those green sources, but I want you to really start, as I'm thinking about and discussing these, I want you to think about where you fit in. One of the things my relatives used to tell me when we start talking about career readiness and what we're doing, they said, get in where you fit in. And so what I want you to be thinking about as I go over each one of these options, ask yourself, what do I know about it? What am I willing to do my homework on? And what opportunities may be available for me? And let's do the easy one up front. We want to talk about solar. Well, if you're just talking about solar energy, look at some of the things you can do. You can be installers. You can manage projects. You can actually be focused on sales. All of them are roles that from the military you know about, you learned about. You know how to lead a project. You know how to actually do the installation work. There's qualifications that you're going to need, and there's training programs available across the country. I always tell people, start using the internet for something more than looking at memes and what some celebrity is doing. Use it as a tool to help make your situation better. So you've got the solar industry, but think about this with the solar industry. It's broken up into different parts. You've got a huge residential solar industry, but you also have a commercial solar industry. And typically solar does not fly alone. To make solar more effective, one of the things you really you should understand how this works. Solar literally partnered with storage. When I talk about storage, I'm talking about battery storage. Now, there's going to be a lot of discussions about what's going on with battery storage, the type of batteries you use, and things like that. But I can tell you, we'll have a whole segment on batteries, because it doesn't matter how much solar you have. If you have an excess of solar and you don't have storage, you're just wasting it. So we want to talk about solar. We want to talk about batteries, occupations like electricians. You can go to your local apprenticeship with some of your labor unions or state-funded or state-supported apprenticeship programs to get that training. Many electricians literally came out of the military. I was a nuclear operator, and during my term, I was a reactor mechanic, and we had hordes of electricians on my ship. So if you have that experience, you should think about that, because all you're doing is hooking up a power source, connecting it to the grid. So we've got solar, we've got batteries. We want to do a whole segment on batteries because there's different types. The advancements are happening incredibly fast, but that's something you want to think about. The other area, when we start talking about opportunities, is the wind energy opportunity. If you've ever seen those big wind turbines, well, I can tell you that is real industrial work. And what they're able to do is typically, as the temperatures changes and the wind comes off, for us in California, the wind comes offshore, but there are states that are like wind tunnels in Wyoming. They can The wind is just blowing. Well, you want to access that wind because from a science perspective, it's about the movement. That's energy. That's power. So wind turbines, and some of the roles, you've got technicians for those big turbines. You've got operations managers in those positions. And another job that people don't often think about, when you have the technical expertise, they always need safety experts and safety coordinators. And those safety coordinators can be throughout many of these industries that we're going to talk about today. So think about that. Now, that industry is growing. Now, I know there's been things in the news talking about, well, they're pulling the funding and things like that. Well, guess what? If we're going to a distributed energy grid, which is what we're moving to, and that means it's not just a big power plant and then the investor-owned utilities deliver it to your house. A distributed energy grid will include numerous microgrids, some big, some small. It includes large, 15, 20 megawatt solar power plants, and they're bringing that power in. Or it could be a small 15 panel solar panels and a battery storage battery unit on your house. That's a microgrid as well. So recognize that the energy is no longer coming from one place. The energy is distributed. So when we talk about a distributed energy network, pick a lane, figure out what part you want to do, whether it's the solar battery, whether it's the wind energy, whether it's also another one area that is right for those folks who have experience in energy and power and utility. There is a huge, huge role and growth in energy efficiency and the science around green technology. So what happens is let's say I want to put solar and battery on my commercial office building. Here's the problem. If my building is not energy efficient, I have the right appliances, I make sure that my windows and doors seal up, so when I have whatever temperature I have on the inside, it doesn't just leak out. So if I don't have all that done, if I don't have energy efficient HVAC systems and HVAC systems that are literally not using excess energy, what you'll wind up doing is buying a much larger solar battery system. So why is energy efficient so important? Is because it saves you money. And the goal for a business is literally, we always talk about bringing down the cost. You want to bring down the cost. You want quality equipment, you want quality service, but you also are concerned about cost. So there's an entire industry in the green, inside of the green energy industry around energy efficiency. So learning how to do audits. You can go into a business once you're trained on how to do audits and say, okay, let's look at the lighting. How energy efficient is your lighting? Are you using energy efficient bulbs? Do you have your electrical systems on timers so that they operate when it's cheaper for them to operate? I had a conversation with some potential clients who were farmers. They were in the agricultural industry. And one of the things we were talking to them about, they spent most of their money buying and moving water. Makes sense, right? You got to water the crop. One of the things we talked to them about was you're watering your crops one guy was watering like toward the later part of the day. Well, I said, but the problem with that is once you get about 4 o'clock, that's incredibly expensive electricity. So is it possible to move your watering to what we call the super off-peak price? But that's an efficiency thing. I'm doing the same thing. I'm watering my crops. But guess what? I get to water them when the electricity is the absolute cheapest. So we need to really start thinking about that, and the energy efficiency specialists can help with that work. And I'm spending a little bit more time on energy efficiency because I know we don't always talk about it. It's like that. You see that big yellow sticker on your appliances. If those appliances are using less electricity, then is it worth it to purchase new appliances over the old ones that are actually using more electricity? Because they're what we call, those are energy drains. And the other piece, the energy efficiency experts, as they do that work, they talk to you about energy vampires. And you say, well, what are you talking about? Let's take your home, for example. Anyone with a smart TV or don't turn their computer off when they're done, they just have it go to sleep. Those are energy vampires. Why? Even though you don't have them on, they're running in the background at a lower level, but they are sucking the electricity you're paying for it, even though you're not using those appliances. So energy efficiency specialists help people learn and do that, learn how to be more efficient. Having, let's say my TV is a smart TV, I don't really need it to be plugged in when I have it off. So I'll have it, and where I can literally turn it off, I'll have the electrical outlet on a switch where I can, when I leave the room, turn the switch off. Well, the TV is actually going all the way off. I use that as a simple example to show you some of the things that can help with that. Another area of energy efficiency for people to think about are HVAC. Air conditioning and refrigeration, it doesn't matter where you go, people need good technicians for HVAC. And now having an understanding of the banning of Freon and what cooling systems and coolants you're going to use, showing people how to break up your HVAC systems. If you're only using a part of the building, but yet I have one big unit, so I am cooling or heating the entire building when I'm only in one room or in two rooms. So part of what the HVAC technicians and the energy efficiency specialists can help you with is, as we're looking at new equipment, you may want to buy, instead of having one big unit, have multiple smaller units. They'll run more efficiently. They'll probably run less often. And so you're now decreasing your energy load. And one of the other special areas is building performance analysts. Again, we're talking about those energy efficiency specialists, but you can even increase your knowledge and become a specialist in that area. And so for your business, those who have buildings, if you have a brick and mortar business, before you go out and put solar and battery on it, you ought to have an efficiency expert come in and look at it and say, okay, how much more efficient can I make my building before I go out and spend money on solar and battery? Because what will happen is, or even hydrogen fuel cell units, whatever you're using, the more efficient you are, because it's cheaper to create efficiency than it is to pay for those large microgrid systems, solar, battery, hydrogen fuel cell units. So those are three areas. We talked about solar, we talked about battery storage, we talked about wind energy, we talked about working in the energy efficiency area. And so always remember, there's trainings available. There's training specifically for veterans. You can again get on the internet and go and search out and seek out what is available for your training in order to do that. And so, and you'll find things like organizations like Troops to Energy jobs. You got getintooenergy.org was one of the websites, getintooenergy.org. You've got Next Era Energy is hiring. One of the things I pulled up, they offer diverse opportunities in renewable energy sectors such as wind, solar, battery storage, and they are actively recruiting veterans. And I'm just giving a shout out to them. There are other companies that are doing magnificent work. Another contractor that people think, oh, they're cutting money from the federal government and doing this, the Department of Energy has initiatives where you're in cooperation. One of the places you're cooperating is with the Department of Defense, our military installations. Okay, it's one thing to be sustainable, but you want to make sure not only do you have sustainability, but it really is about mission readiness. And so these renewable energy sources and these microgrids allow our military installations, let's say all the power is cut off, but if I've got microgrids running, if I got long-term battery storage available to me, then I can cut off from the outside world and still maintain effective operations because we have those, we have the equipment in place for us to do what we need to do to meet the mission. And so companies are contracting to build long-term storage, 4-hour, 8-hour, 12-hour storage from battery units, so you make it through the night. So guess what? Your solar charges your batteries during the day, and you have enough solar to where you're using it, you've got electricity, you're charging your batteries, and then at night, you literally have battery storage. That battery storage now is so you don't miss a beat. You don't go dark. You've got your lights. You've got your equipment running. You're in good shape. So one of the things to think about is the fact that our military installations are hiring companies to build these sustainable microgrids. So those are just a couple of areas. And I know I'm watching my time because I could go on and on about this. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is how do you make this transition? You know, Rob, you talked about all this stuff. I can do X, I can do Y, I can do Z, but it's all about preparation. You went to boot camp, right? I'm talking directly to the veterans. You went to boot camp. What was boot camp about? Boot camp was about preparing you for the mission, teaching you how to work as a team, doing less of you and more of the soldier, the Marine, the sailor, teaching you how to be what they need you to be and preparing you so now, after boot camp, we can send you to A school. We can train you for a particular position and you're ready to do that. So one of the things you want to do is your training from the military, those are transferable skills. Some of the veterans I talk to, it's like they write their resumes and they use all of their military lingo. Go online, figure out what the civilian term is for your rating. Because what that does is the folks looking at your resume may or may not be veterans. But it's important that when you go into another person's environment, it is upon you to speak their language. And when you transfer your rating information to what the job connections are, you're speaking the human resource person's language. So those things are really important. And it's okay for veterans to go work for someone and learn as much as you can, because from there, you may want to start your business. Everything's about preparation. You're learning and you're growing. You can learn about how to run a business. And in some cases, I've worked for a couple of places, and what I learned was how to not run a business or how to run a business into the ground. So you're learning and identifying your military skills and which ones align with the energy sector roles. So remember this, one of the things you're taught in the military as you promote, you get those leadership skills. Those leadership skills come in handy because oftentimes I don't need to know everything about the job I'm doing, but I do need to better understand the people I have doing it. I need to understand the do's and don'ts of a particular project. I need to understand how to get the best out of the team I'm leading. And so your military leadership training and development, it has value. And do not, just because it's easy, it's simple for you sometimes. Sometimes folks who came out of the military were leaders for so long, it was second nature, so they don't really acknowledge the value. Leadership is critical for any project success. And a lot of what's going on in the green energy space is about bringing projects to completion. So your leadership. Another one is understand what technical skills that you get from the military. Everything from fire protection to being an electrical or a mechanic. All of those have a place when it comes to working in the energy sector. The energy sector, I mean, there's some estimates, and they're talking about us just on our grid spending $1 trillion to overhaul our energy grid. Now, if they're spending $1 trillion, someone's doing the work. Recognize that work, you should be doing it. And so the other thing I think we learned in the military, and as we go back to, there's so many changes and things happening right now. What you're doing, let's say you got laid off, or you're looking to change, or your work environment is bad, go back into your bag of tricks from the military. And I'll call it a bag of tricks because we had learned so many different things. But one of the things you were taught, I know I was, and those who were around me, was how to solve problems. Because we didn't always have every resource available. So oftentimes we had to figure out how to solve problems. Recognize now everything from huge corporations to small residential solar companies are looking for people who can solve problems. Are you going to just get frustrated and quit? Or are you going to ask the right questions? Are you going to do the research? Are you going to communicate with people who are doing this to solve those problems? Leadership, problem solving. Two critical areas that, how do I put that on my resume? We'll talk about what you've done in the military. Give examples. Be prepared to talk about examples of how you problem solve. That's how you get to moving forward for opportunities. Because honestly, use what you have, and that's your veteran status. Because a number of companies, when they hear you're a veteran, they already know you're there. And so leverage your network. America's Heroes Group is where you really want to actually connect, because they're bringing resources to you. So now you've got leadership, you understand how to solve problems, but also that resume is important. And one of the things I always tell people to think about this: seek out and find local programs to get certification. Why certifications? Typically, certifications don't require 3, 4, 5 years. Certifications are a defined set of training and information that will get you ready for a particular job. And so what you want to do is get that information, start seeking them out. An example of what you can go, say, I want to know who's got a program in solar for veterans. So you start looking that up. Solar Ready Vet, that's a program. Solar Ready Vet. Now, where you are, it depends on where you are. You have to look for local programs because there's so many different things going on. And so what I want to do is let you know we have so much more to talk about. But again, the industry is ready. We're ready. Companies are ready. Continue growing, and you get ready for the opportunities in the green energy industry. And over the next few months, I'm going to bring specific areas. Let's dig down and get way deep into it. But until then, I hope you find something that you can do and you can study and you can start moving forward in this industry, because we need the help. We're hiring like crazy. I'm Rob Howard. I'm a Navy veteran. I'm CEO of Zodiac Solutions, and I'm I'm here to talk to you about clean energy infrastructure on America's Heroes Group. I will see you next month, everybody.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.